like, go me. Let's just talk about them. Why am I so awkward? Okay. That's a deep question. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy. All the books that I read in August. Sponsored by Didnt. I wish. So today we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the month of August. I ended up reading 12 books, which is pretty awesome. I didn't think I'd get around to that many books, and I'm pretty sure this is the first month that I've completed everything from my TBR game. So like no punishments for me, which you would have already seen because my TBR would have already come out for September. I'm just rambling at this point. I think I did pretty well. I did a lot of audiobooks this month because it's the first full month that I was at a new job, and so I could kind of figure out what my schedule was like and how my reading is going to be for like a little bit now, and audiobooks are my best friend. So we did quite a few audiobooks. But let's just get into the stats and talk about books that I read, because that's why we're all here. So I read a total of 3,459 pages. I think that was better than last month. I honestly cannot remember, but that's over a total of 9 audiobooks, 2 physical books, and 1 ebook. And of those 12 books, I read 10 YA books, 1 adult, and 1 middle grade. And my genres were not all over the place, but we did have some new ones this month. So I did have 1 magical realism, I had 3 contemporary, 1 sci-fi, 4 fantasy, 2 poetry, and 1 nonfiction. And of the variety of books that I had, my star ratings were like not spread out. So I had 1 5-star, 9 4-star, and 2 3-stars, but technically both of those 3 stars were 3.5s. So 4-star was like the rating this month. But with that being said, let's just get into what I read. So the very first book that I finished in the month of August was Where I End and You Begin by Preston Norton. This one was my magical realism. Technically it's like contemporary, but to me magical realism felt like the bigger of the genres. This one got 4 stars from me. This book was weird. That's like the best word to describe it, because it's like a Freaky Friday situation between this guy named Ezra and this girl named Winona, but they both are crushing on the other one's best friend, and so they kind of strike up this pact once they realize that they're switching bodies to like help them out with their crush. I don't know how to like talk about this book because like all of the weird things that like I want to say are like huge spoilers. But it's weird. I don't read weird books. I usually don't like weird books, but I don't know what it was about this one, but I kept reading. I couldn't stop. I needed to know what was going to happen. And there's a lot of talk about gender fluidity in this book. Now, I don't know if it's done well or not. Like, I don't really know how to talk on that, but it was a very large subject within this. This one is really, really hard for me to give a review on, which is like literally the point of this channel. But it's very strange. There's a lot of interesting situations. It's very interesting because this character or this author doesn't shy away from things. So the fact that like they've switched bodies means that they have switched things that happen to them. So like, for example, when Ezra is in Winona's body, she gets her period, and so he has to like deal with the fact that like he's having a period for the first time. It's weird, but like it doesn't shy away from its weirdness. So like I gave it 4 stars because it kept me reading, it kept me wanting to know what was going to happen, but I'm not sure if I loved it or not. So like I'm very conflicted on this book, but it was interesting. That's what I'm gonna say about it. I liked the way that the writing style in this book. I really liked that it's all from Ezra's perspective, which I appreciated that they didn't like switch back and forth from the two main characters, because the two main characters switch so much that I appreciated that it was only from one person, which I think worked really, really well. But the way that he writes is just very unique. It's very funny at times. He just has like a different perspective on life, but one that like I can really relate to. And like when he says certain things, you're like, oh, that's exactly what that is like, or that's exactly what that thing looks like. But it's not a way that you would have probably thought of it. So it's definitely a unique perspective, and I really appreciated the writing. And that's honestly probably why it got 4 instead of 3 stars, because I couldn't get past the weirdness of this book. But I still really enjoyed it. And that's what I'm going to say. I'm so sorry that I can't really talk about this one very well. One thing that I appreciated about this book was that, let's just say for the sake of argument, that like body swapping, like Freaky Friday style can happen. If you get swapped into another person's body, you're not going to automatically know how that person acts like. And so obviously our main characters don't know how to act like the other person. And so they don't. They act like themselves. And that felt very realistic. So I liked that he didn't sugarcoat it and like they're just going to automatically know how the other person acts and no one's going to know that they're different. People notice that there are changes within them. So I appreciated that that was the route that this author went with that one. The next book that I picked up was Invictus by Ryan Groudon. This is a time travel sci-fi story that I'd heard mixed things about, but I gave it 4 stars. This is very trippy. If you like the found family trope, this definitely has like your trope of people. It's very heisty as well, so if you like heist stories, this gave me like sci-fi Six of Crows vibes, in the sense of like they have a plan and they're a troop of people executing said plan. I really enjoyed my time reading this one. Like I said, I did give it 4 stars. The writing itself is not amazing. I wasn't really blown away by the writing, but the story development and the plot development was great. I loved these characters. I loved the plot line. I think it was so incredibly creative the way that this worked out, and like there is like a kind of like a mystery aspect to this, and I think that the mystery part of this was written really well. So like maybe your writing's actually better than I thought it was, but like it was actually really good. I'm so bad at giving reviews today. I really enjoy this. So like I said, if you like the found family trope, if you like heisty situations, if you like sci-fi and time travel, this is your book. Like this is your go-to time travel-y situation. Everything that like is a stereotypical time travel book, I feel like is in here. It's very scientific as well when it comes to the time travel, which I felt worked really well. I also like that this wasn't a series. This was like a one and done, because this felt good. I felt like there wasn't any need for any more story. I felt like this was enough. So I'm glad that this isn't like dragged on for a while. I felt like the story and the plot line that she had in this book was enough. There didn't need to be any more. So I appreciated that. This was good. Read it if you like time travel things. Christopher, the next one, was also a weird book. This was the month of weird things, because I read Monstrous Volume 1, and that is by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda, maybe? This is a horror manga, the start of a series. I think there's like 5 or 6, I think. I'm not entirely sure. I was hesitant. Let me just hit myself in the face. I was hesitant going into this one because like, I don't like horror. I don't read horror. I don't like it. And so I wasn't quite sure what I was getting myself into with this one, and it was weird. I think as far as like horror goes, this is very graphic. This is very like weird monster creature horror, if that makes any sense. So like it was very strange. I didn't know what was happening most of the time. Like, I'm not even kidding you. I was confused into the last 10%, and then everything made sense, and then it ended, and I was like, oh, well, see, now I'm hooked, and I kind of want to know what's going to happen. So I think I'm going to continue with the series, but now that I kind of have an understanding of what this is about, what the characters are, how weird it's going to be, now that I know that that's going to be a thing, I think I can continue and enjoy it. I did still give this 4 stars. I think that the artwork in here is just stunning. Like I said, it's very, very graphic, which is, not my favorite thing in the world. Like here's a good explanation. Like that artwork, whew, gorgeous. But like I will continue reading this for the artwork alone. It was just very good. It was just very weird. And like I said, I don't usually do weird things, but like this worked. Like I said, you're confused for most of this book, and then on the last 10%, everything kind of starts to make sense. And there are times when I had to read, like there are scenes that are going on, and so you're reading the dialogue from that scene, but you're also reading like bits from like history, which puts in place, like helps you kind of understand the world a little bit. And so sometimes I would have to just go through and read like the little narration or the history first, and then I would go back and read like the dialogue, because it would go back and forth. And like for this story, that just didn't work for me. I had to read those sections a couple of times because I couldn't focus on 2 things happening at the same time. So that's my only, I guess, complaint, is that like I was incredibly confused for a lot of this, but it still worked for me, and I still want to know what's going to happen. The next one was my 5-star read, and I am so glad that I listened to this one. I actually listened to the audiobook of this one, and that is The Epic Adventures of Lydia Bennett, and this is by Kate Rorick and Rachel Killey. But this is a novel companion that goes along with the Lizzie Bennett Diaries here on YouTube. It's been out for like, I don't know, 10 years, probably at least. Basically, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll leave a link to like the playlist if you want to watch all like 100 episodes, but it's a modernized YouTube version of Pride and Prejudice, and I'm obsessed with it. I love it so much. The Epic Adventures of Lydia Bennett is a companion that takes place after the events of the TV YouTube show. So obviously you'd have to have watched the show in order to read this book. I gave it 5 stars. I loved this, but I have a lot of nostalgia attached to this series. I love this series. Anything this series does, I'm obsessed with the actors in this series. So the actress who plays Lydia Bennett in the show is the one who narrated this audiobook, and she's a phenomenal actress. And so like that's partially why I went with the audiobook for this, because I knew it was going to be amazing. Was it the most amazing thing that I've ever read in my entire life? No. But like I said, I loved this show so much. So anything related to this show, I'm gonna love. So like, obviously 5 stars for this book, because like, phenomenal. One of the things that it does tackle, which I really appreciated, was it tackles the positive therapy, basically. That's not how I'm trying to say this. It tackles how good therapy can be. It like doesn't shame people for going to therapy. It like encourages you to have to go to therapy because of some of the events that happen in the show. Lydia is going to a therapist and talking through some stuff. It also talks a lot about the idea of trauma and like how it can take such different forms. But I think my favorite part about this entire book was the amazing discussion of like grappling with who you used to be, who you think you should be, and who you want to be. And it's just beautiful because Lydia is 22, 21, 22-ish, I think. And she is just finishing her like 2nd year of community college. And so I just think it's this beautiful discussion of that. I'm thinking really deeply into this, but it was so good. I am so biased when it comes to things that surround surrounding the Lizzie Bennett Diaries. I love it so much. So this one was so much fun. 5 stars for sure. My favorite read of the month. It was great. I really liked it. The next one that I read was one that hit me in the feels, and that is When the World Didn't End, Poems by Caroline Kaufman. This is a poetry collection. It's the 2nd by this author, and she tackles so much within these pages. And I really appreciated this book because it gives the reader a look at mental illness. So like trigger warnings, I'm just going to give you a small list, but it's things like mental illness, suicidal ideation, self-harm, disordered eating, and sexual assault are just like a handful of the things that she goes through in this book. And I think that she does such an amazing job because I was lucky enough to find the audiobook by the narrator or by the author, so it felt extra real because she was reading her own poetry, and her poetry is so raw and like down to earth to begin with. The fact that I found her reading it just made it 10 times more amazing than it already was. But my favorite thing about this book is that, like, it doesn't matter who you are. I think that everyone can get something from this. It's great for people who maybe aren't really into poetry and so like don't really know what they're getting into. I think this is a really good first step. It tackles mental illness in such an amazingly raw way that if you struggle from mental illness, I think you'll find something within these pages that you can really relate to. But if you don't suffer from any kind of mental illness, this can give you a good look at what it's like. It's not going to be exactly, like, you can't get exactly what people are going through, but it's a good kind of way to understand and a good way to kind of put yourselves in the shoes of someone suffering from mental illness so that you can get a better understanding of it. So I think this is really fantastic. Have I told you I gave it 4 stars? Because I gave it 4 stars. I really like her writing. It's very simplistic, but like I said, it's super raw. It's super, like, hits you in the emotions. It was very good. The next book, you probably just saw it, that I picked up was A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow. I gave this 4 stars. It was really good. I will say this is written like a contemporary. It's written very non-fantastical. It just has fantastical elements in it. So this is kind of set in like our world today, except for all of these fantastical things exist. Gargoyles exist, sprites exist. Everybody knows that these things are things, but sirens are thought to be this like really dangerous group of people, and if you are a known siren, then they put a collar on you so that you can't use your siren voice to influence people. This is a giant metaphor for the Black Lives Matter movement and for Black lives in America, but like the world. This is set in Portland, so specifically the US, but like the world. And like that's exactly what it is. Like, you feel that with every sentence in this book. It did take me about halfway through to get into the book. I wasn't entirely loving it. It is from our 2 main characters' perspectives, which are Effie and Tavia, which is back and forth from their perspectives. And this really did feel like a debut novel because the writing wasn't perfect. There were definitely some issues with it. My biggest one, I think, was that I couldn't tell the difference between the main characters. The writing style didn't change at all between the 2 girls, and like usually that stuff wouldn't bother me, but when I'm trying to understand and I'm trying to get to know these characters and trying to figure out like whose head I'm in, and I can't remember whose head I'm in, that's a little problematic. So like that really kind of, I really struggled with that until like halfway through, and I kind of figured out, okay, who was who, what was happening. There's also like a total underlying mystery surrounding Effie, which like it did amazingly. There are just the mythology that goes into this book is incredible. Y'all know I like mythology. So like all of the mythology and mythical creatures that showed up in this book made me so incredibly happy. It just like there were some plot things and some writing things that really suffered for me. So like it wasn't incredible, but the purpose of it to talk about these issues, it did its job. I really did enjoy my time. It just took me a little bit to get into it, but once I was into it, I was like there for it. And the ending just like was everything I wanted, and so good. It was very, very good. It was very good. The next book I picked up was the 10th in the series Unfortunate Events, the 9th, not the 10th, which is the Carnivore Carnival. I gave it 4 stars. I really don't know what to say about this because like having read 9 of these books, I feel like I'm starting to repeat myself a lot. This is great. I like that we are starting to get even more of the story. The children are on their own now, and like in this book specifically, the kids and Olaf swapped MOs, like what Olaf usually did, which was disguise himself and hide under the kids' noses, or, well, the guardians' noses. The kids did in this, except for they hid under Olaf's nose. It was just very well done, and it was good. I enjoyed it. I'm intrigued to see what else is here, because, like, we've got 3 books left. No, we've got 4 books left, and I remember nothing. So I am stressing, because I'm so into the story now, but it was good. It's a really good middle grade. Everything I've said about these in the past is still accurate for this one. I don't know how to talk about this one, since I've talked about so many before, but it was good. I enjoyed it. 4 stars. The next one I picked up was Bull by David Elliott, which is a reread for me. I read this one last June, I want to say, and didn't particularly love it. I think I gave it 3 stars. I ended up giving it 3.5 this time. I found an audiobook of this, and I think that really helped a lot, because I think this is very similar to, like, how Shakespeare is, where Shakespeare was written to be heard. It was not written to be read. And so it's very hard to just sit there and read a play of Shakespeare. It's so much better to find an audio recording of it or to watch an adaptation. Like, that's probably the best way to experience a Shakespeare play. That's kind of what this felt like, where just reading it was okay, but when I got an audiobook in my ear and I was reading along as the audiobook was going, that helped a whole lot. Still didn't love this book, but it was definitely the better experience. So I'm glad I gave this a second try. It's still not amazing, but it was not as bad as the first time, which I appreciated. And I was able to read this in like 2 days instead of, an entire month. I think if I had read it again, it would have still not been great, but I highly recommend the audiobook of this if this is something that you're into. Okay, the next one I'm like super hesitant to talk about because I didn't like it as much as other people, and like it's a booktube favorite. So I'm stressing. So please be nice to me if you liked this book. But that is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I gave it 3.5 stars. Still a decent rating. Like, it wasn't a bad rating, but I was like super disappointed with this book because everyone and their brother loves V.E. Schwab's writing here on BookTube. And like, I didn't care. I didn't think it was incredible or amazing. And the story was okay. Like, this really felt like if you took Mistborn and Six of Crows, like those 2 series, this is like in the same vein. Like, if you mesh them up, like, you get this. It felt like the same characters. It felt relatively close to the same plot line. Like, the magic system and how there are 4 Londons, that was very fascinating to me. I really did like that part of it. But like, I didn't care about any of the people in this, and like, I listened to the audiobook and the narrator is fantastic. I could listen to him for hours. So I know it wasn't the audiobook's fault. So I'm gonna continue with this series. Obviously, I have all 3 of them. I've heard it gets better. I've heard that the 3rd one is the best. I'm not entirely sure about that. And like, all of V.E. Schwab's books sound so interesting to me. But I'm so, like, I was really disappointed with this because I didn't love it as much as I thought I was going to. So like, I'm sad. I wasn't connected to them. I didn't care about them, and I wanted to, but I didn't. So I'm stressed, but it was still decent. Like, 3.5 is not a bad rating. I still like how it ended, but I just don't know if it was super hyped, and so I hyped it way too high in my mind. I don't know what happened, but it was okay. It was just okay, and I am sad. The next one that I picked up was totally gotta win, and that is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is the only Elizabeth Acevedo book that is out right now that I haven't read. I read The Clap When You Land and The Poet X last month, loved her writing style, wanted to read everything that she had written. So I gave this one a try. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I still really enjoyed this book, but I didn't like it as much as her other 2. I think I like Clap When You Land the most out of her 3 books, but this was still really good. I loved her writing style. I listened to the audiobook of this one, obviously, because I will quite literally listen to anything that she reads or writes because her voice is so calming and relaxing, and I love it. I wasn't really into it for about the first half of it. I was like, okay, this is, where's the plot, basically. And then once we started getting into the cooking class that she is in, and when they start doing the fundraiser for the trip that they're going to take to Spain, I started to appreciate this one a lot more, and I liked it. I did. I really did enjoy this one. It was good. I think I'm just a little disappointed because I expected it to be a 5-star. I expected it to be like this amazing thing because I loved the other two so much. And it was good. It just wasn't great. This just one I don't think sunk with me as well as the others did, but it was still really good. I still really enjoyed it. It's true what people say. This book makes you hungry. Every time she cooked, she would talk about like what she was making, and I was like, can you make that for me? Because like, I would love to eat that. That sounds amazing. Why can't I cook like that? I also like that it was about cooking, because like, what teenager is like, I want to be a chef? I feel like that's not something that like a lot of people strive to be, and at least you don't see it a lot in literature. Like, you don't see a lot of teenagers in high school going, I would like to be a chef when I grow up. Maybe I'm reading the wrong books. Also liked seeing the struggle of her being a teenage mother on top of all of that, which was an interesting situation. It was good. I really did enjoy it, just not as much as the other ones. The next one I read was actually just like a quick Audible original that I decided to listen to because I ran out of audiobooks to listen to, and I wanted something nonfiction-y that was more of a podcast type situation. And so I ended up picking up the Real Sherlock by Lucinda Huxley. This is like a 2-hour audiobook, or it's more like a podcast, but it just talks about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, his life. It's not just about Sherlock Holmes, but that is a big chunk of it because like that was a big chunk of his life, but it follows him as an author, and it's very fascinating. It was really fun to listen to. It's very podcasty. It just talked about his life and like where he got his inspiration from and why he decided to do certain things for Sherlock Holmes, and it was just very fascinating. So if you like Sherlock Holmes or you're interested about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, I highly recommend this. I gave it 4 stars. It was very good. There's not much to say on it because it was more of a podcast than a book, but it was still very good. I enjoyed it. We're down to the very last one, and that one is Roaring by Lindsay Dugo, which I ended up giving 4 stars to. There is a fuzzy. Be gone. I really liked this book. This one was a very good. I was given a arc on a NetGalley of this one. It actually came out on the 3rd of September, so it's out now. You guys can go check it out if you're interested. I'll also leave my Goodreads review down below if you want to see like a much more detailed version than what I'm about to say. But this basically is set in the Roaring 20s, and it follows like if monsters were a thing, and they call them monsters in the book, but it's more like mythical creatures like sirens and cyclops, minotaurs. There's a basilisk at one point. Like they are. Oh, there's a chimera at one point. Like there's a lot within this book. And it follows our main 2 characters. One of them is a siren, but doesn't know that she's a siren until like the other character confronts her about it. And then we follow this other guy who is part of kind of like the FBI, but for mythical creatures. And he's been tasked by hunting this siren down. I think my favorite part about this book was they have this conversation about how these mythical creatures are created, and it's very scientific. And if mythical creatures could be a thing, this made it feel so realistic of how they can become like part of this world. And it was just very, very cool. I also felt like setting this in the 20s was the appropriate time period for it because it just kind of like felt right. Oh, I really liked it. It just took me so long to read, and that's like totally on me. It's not the book's fault because when I was reading the book, I was there. It was just that like I never had time to physically sit down and read my Kindle. So I did it. And when I was reading, I was like invested. I loved it. It was so good. One thing that I didn't love about this book was that the writing wasn't anything amazing. It was okay. It was a little cheesy at times. Some of the reveals you could see coming a mile away. Some you couldn't. Some I was still surprised by. But some things you could definitely see a mile away. Some of like the mysterious elements where like she would pepper in facts to like a big reveal. I called it way, way early on. And so like I felt like she wasn't being as mysterious with those parts as she wanted to be. But I still really enjoyed it. I still liked this. The romance was amazing. I was there for. It did happen a little quick. For like it wasn't insta-lovey. I wouldn't say it was insta-lovey. I would say that they got feelings relatively quickly. And the fact that like when they saw each other, they weren't like, you were the person I'm in love with. It was like they'd spend a week together and then they're like, okay, I'm in love with you. And like even at one point there's a side character who called them out on it, which I appreciated, because it was like the author going, okay, look, I realized this was fast, but I'm gonna keep it in there and do it anyway. But like their romance was still very cute. So I appreciated that. It was good. I highly recommend. And like I said, please go check out my review because it's a lot more eloquently worded than what just happened. So that is it. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of August. I hope you enjoyed. This was very messy and all over the place because I don't know what it was. Today I just can't review. But I hope that at least some of these made sense and some of them were things that you would like to pick up at some point. I would highly recommend these books. But that is really all I have for you guys today. So I hope that you enjoyed. Let's chat down below if you've read any of the books that I mentioned, or if there's a book that you read in August that you just would like to rave about. I will happily listen / read your ravings. So leave that in the comments down below. But if you did like this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you want to be part of this awesome growing family. I have my social media down there as well if you want to follow along on any of those. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.